Welcome to the final recording in the digestive system, and this one, let's get started with the large intestine. And so hopefully in lab you've learned all these structures. I'm just going to review them again for you really quickly. So the distal part of the small intestine, the ileum, enters the large intestine in the right lower quadrant in your abdomen, and we have another sphincter here called an ileocecal valve. The portion of the large intestine which hangs below that level is called the cecum, and hanging off the cecum is the appendix, or the vermiform appendix. From there, fecal flow will go up the right abdominal wall in the ascending colon until it reaches the liver, and then it goes across the abdomen to the left upper quadrant. And although a lot of pictures show it straight across, it sags. There's gravity. It sags in the transverse colon, and then it turns at the spleen and goes down the left wall of the abdomen in the descending colon until it hits the ileum, and then we have an S-shaped curve called the sigmoid colon. After that, it's going to dive retroperitoneally, where we will have the rectum and eventually the anal canal. So looking at the parts that are colon and the cecum, they all have these structures that we don't have in the rectum, and that is we have tenia coli and we have a haustrum. So first, what is the tenia coli? And yes, there's a couple of different ways of spelling it. Well, as we've talked, the normal muscle arrangement is inner circular and outer longitudinal. But what happens in the colon, we don't have a whole 360 of the outer longitudinal muscle layers. We just have three distinct bands. So one band is exactly where the mesocolon attaches to the colon. And then that lets you only see two bands. So there's one here, and then you can see this one on the other side of it, which we go down the back side, and here we have the front side. So we have three distinct bands of tenia coli. And so what that means is the entire colon doesn't have all this extra longitudinal muscle for moving stuff along. And that allows the colon to sort of get these out pouches as it's contracting. You can see all these little out pouching areas, and so each one of these is known as a haustrum. So this is a slide for you to compare the large intestine with the small intestine. I want to point out there are no villi in the large intestine, but there are crypts, okay? Besides that, everything is extremely similar. So what kind of activity do we have going on in the large intestine? Well, we've got two layers of muscle, so we still have peristalsis, but that outer longitudinal is kind of like 95% gone. So the peristalsis that we have in the colon, in the large intestine, sorry, is actually kind of weak and sluggish. We do have a lot of churning. In other words, when fecal material goes to an area and distends it, that gives nerve stimuli, which causes churning inside the haustrum, kind of like what we were having with segmentation in the small intestine. But the small intestine didn't have haustrum, so haustral churning means inside one area, we are going to be like kneading the material that's in that area. Then we have a couple amazing reflexes, and these are so important to keep in mind if you're trying to potty train a child, because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. When you eat, when food enters your stomach, we have what we call a gastroileo reflex, in that the distension of the stomach causes the ileocecal valve to open, and whatever contents were in the distal ileum will then travel into the cecum ascending colon area, thereby stimulating some colonic activity. And so what this stimulates is something called the gastrocolic reflexes, which means we're going to get some of that peristalsis. So whatever was sitting in the ascending colon has to move along to the transverse colon, or whatever was sitting there needs to move along to the descending colon, whatever was sitting there, or the sigmoid colon needs to move along to the rectum. So we have this gastrocolic reflex, meaning stuff is going to move down towards your rectum and then you're going to start feeling it. So like the best time to put your child on the potty for potty training is after breakfast when these reflexes have kicked in. So about 30 to 45 minutes after breakfast is your best bet, because we do get these mass fecal movements usually about twice a day. Some people more than twice a day, some people less than twice a day, but the most reliable one is the one after the breakfast in the morning, because we've got really strong reflexes because you haven't eaten for many hours. You can have a similar reflex after lunch and another one after dinner. So if you're only going to have 2 fecal movements a day, they'd probably be after breakfast and after dinner. So what does the large intestine do? Well, it doesn't absorb nutrients. And so if it hasn't been absorbed by the time it hit the ileocecal valve, you're pretty much out of luck. It does absorb the water, because remember, we had like the 1.5 liters coming in from the saliva, and then another 1.5 liters from the food and the gastric secretions, plus the other liter the small intestine made. Well, the small intestine did a great job, but it didn't get it all absorbed. So there's still about 1 liter that enters your colon every single day. And if you don't believe that, think of the last time you had diarrhea. Well, that water coming out, it's because the transit time through your large intestine was too fast, so there wasn't time to absorb it. It also will absorb gas, about 95% of the 10 liters made every day. 10 liters of gas your body makes. Now, if you're going to eat beans or other cruciferous vegetables like cabbage and its relatives, you're going to be making more than 10 liters a day. So think about that. So passing gas. Yeah, you don't have to do it in front of your mother. Just telling you, you don't have to do it in the car when she picks you up. Like, ladies, we learn to like go to the bathroom to do it, or do it someplace discreet where nobody's around. It's not a boy thing, but for some reason they think it is okay, or many think it's okay. You know, grow up, social situations. If you were meeting the queen, you wouldn't be farting in front of the queen. So just treat your mother like a queen and don't fart in front of her. She really does not appreciate it. All right. Now, in your large intestine, you have the equivalent of a house band, in that you have intestinal bacteria that live there, especially in the rectal area. The more distal you are, the higher the bacterial count. They are very important because they actually produce B vitamins, which are important for carbohydrate digestion. They are also responsible for producing vitamin K. And you go, wait a minute, I think vitamin K came from the liver. Well, it does there as well. But if you think about a newborn child, their liver's not quite up to snuff. Plus, they are born in a sterile environment until they pass through the birth canal. Or if you had a C-section, until they're put on your mother's skin, and then they're going to start picking up the mom's bacteria, and so they can't make this extra vitamin K that they need, which is why it's very common to give newborns an injection of vitamin K, especially if they need to remain hospitalized for anything, because we just don't want them bleeding if we have to put an IV in them or do any procedures, a bunch of blood tests, etc. And then the one function that I'm sure all of you could think of, this is where your feces is formed. And even though you may like to think of it as being this solid mass, it's actually about 3/4 water. How can you tell when it's less than 3/4 water? Because it's like a porcupine ball coming out and it hurts. Okay, so let's not do this. Remember that the brownness means that your liver is working and you have the bilirubin waste products in your stool. And also, even though the normal transit time may be closer to 24 hours, it can take 48 hours to go through. And that brings us to the process of defecation. When you're a 2-year-old trying to learn how to potty train, you can poop outside. Otherwise, find a toilet. Okay? So, how are you going to poop? Well, in the first place, the feces needs to be in the rectum. which is in a retroperitoneal location. From there, it will travel into your anus. But first, talking about your rectum. If you look at this, you can see that there are like these three shelves, or these three infoldings. Yes, these are called valves, but basically they're like ledges that the poop can sit on. And then the gas can travel around. So if you feel like you got a lot of gas and you can't get out, well, like lay on this side, gas rises, then turn on the other side and gas rises and go back and forth. And the gas can make its way out, and then your abdominal tension goes away and you usually feel a lot better. So yes, you should be able to pass gas without creating skids in your underwear. Now, the anus is inferior to the rectum, and if it looks like it has ridges, it's because it does have ridges. These are called anal columns, and sitting behind the anal columns, we have this venous plexus of hemorrhoidal veins. So everybody has these internal hemorrhoids, and then if you've had to push a lot, sometimes these internal hemorrhoids become external. Ask your mother, when she pushed you out of her vagina, she did not appreciate the fact that your head was down there. And lots of mothers, when they are pregnant or postpartum, have hemorrhoids, which may or may not go back to being internal. There's not a problem unless there's a problem with the veins there and you get blood clots and then they hurt like Jesus and you get a little surgery to take care of them. But otherwise, everybody's got them internally. You just didn't know you did. So at the level of the anal canal, there are two sphincters. There is an internal sphincter, which is smooth muscle. Okay, here's the anal canal coming down. There's an internal sphincter, and it is surrounded by an external sphincter with the skeletal muscle. And then don't forget, we have the levator ani muscle coming up in a V shape like a hammock, a sling to hold everything up so it doesn't prolapse down between your legs, because that would not be a good thing. So, how do you learn how to poop? How do you learn to potty train? Well, you'll have to understand the basic physiology. When there's fecal material sitting here in the rectum and it distends the rectum, there is sensory input to the central nervous system. It goes, hey, your rectum's being distended. So then there's involuntary motor input coming back down to the rectum, say, hey, relax, smooth muscle. So the smooth muscle in the rectum and the lower part of the sigmoid colon relaxes, and that internal anal sphincter is completely relaxed. So the only thing holding the fecal material in right now is that external sphincter, because that was skeletal muscle. And so in order to learn how to use the toilet, potty train, you have to learn how to relax the skeletal muscle. That is voluntary motor. And so the most important thing you need to do is have your child learn how to relax it, okay? But what mistake a lot of parents do is like the child, they go, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, don't poop, don't poop, don't poop till I get you to a toilet. And the child becomes a master of constricting the external anal sphincter, because you gotta realize, this is the first thing in his life that that child can control. You control what he eats, you control what he wears, what you buy for him, what you feed him, bedtime, all that stuff, what they're playing with, what they're not doing. But that child controls whether or not that external anal sphincter is contracted or relaxing. So yes, you have to accept a few mistakes, because you don't want the lesson to be holding the sphincter until after your child has mastered potty training about 80% of it, and then you can work on the detail, like if you feel it, hold it until I get you to the potty. And this is the time in your life, ladies and gentlemen, where you will learn what every single toilet is in every single store, even the ones that say they don't have bathrooms, except for employees, because they would much rather you have your 2-year-old child poop in their toilet than poop where every one of their other customers can smell it and won't come into the store. And you'll also learn which stores have cleanliness issues, and maybe you should be buying stuff from them, because however their toilet is, like, just think of how their kitchens might look. All right, so if you're gonna poop into a toilet. With that, we are done with all the new material. However, I have a couple of study exercises for you. And the first one is, in a big picture, take an entire page or take 2 pieces of paper, put them together. Draw the 3 accessory abdominal organs, but you have to attach them to the stomach and to the small intestine. So you need to make this big because this is only part 1 where you're labeling all the organs and doing the pathways. Part 2 is now you're going to throw in all those hormones you learned about the small intestine and from the stomach and from the pancreas, and put all your arrows, what is causing what, put your different kind of food stuff, and so you can see everything on one huge page. And there's your visual. And because on test time you don't get to draw pictures and submit pictures, here it is in words in a table. So on the left, I've given you various areas of the alimentary canal, and I've left out the accessory organs because you should know where they're opening into. The next column is the accessory organs, put them in the right place, then make 2 columns. What kind of mechanical digestion happens in this area? What kind of chemical digestion? Name those enzymes and what those enzymes are doing. Or if they're not enzymes, name at least what's being produced. And then absorption. What kind of absorbing is happening in what place? And then you will be ready for your quiz and your test. So thank you very much. I know the digestive system is another one of those difficult organ systems because there's so many moving parts, but I also know that you can do this. And I'll see